Okay, we're get started. Looks like we have a bunch more people that joined. So hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Yoni Ron, Regional Director of Sales at Genea. Hope everyone is doing well. Our topic for today's webinar will be submetering laws, regulations, and how you should adjust. To give you an idea of some of the areas we'll be covering, in front of you is our agenda for the next hour. We'll start with an overview of ASHRAE's 90.1 from 2019. This is going to be a quick overview of building energy codes for commercial properties and the minimum requirements for energy efficient design in the United States. Next, we'll cover California's Title 24. We'll go over the energy standards for California buildings that are designed to help promote energy efficiency. From there, we'll head over to the East Coast and take a deep dive into New York City's Local Law 88 and 97, which requires larger New York City buildings to upgrade their lighting systems by 2025, as well as their submetering their larger tenants in their commercial buildings. Finally, we'll end the discussion with some ideas on how to meet these requirements by giving you a few suggestions on how to get started with automating your submeter reading and billing processes. Before I introduce our industry experts, I wanted to give everyone a little background on our company. Genea is a cloud-based commercial real estate software platform. We are focused on smart building technology, and we have a very heavy emphasis on automating building operations. If you think back about 10, 12 years ago, we were in 9 million square feet across maybe a dozen properties. Today, we have grown into well over 250 million square feet and are implemented in nearly 1,600 buildings. On the right side of your screen are some of our customers that we currently work with, including JLL, Irvine Company, Brookfield. We're in a third of the Haine portfolio. So actually, when you think of the top 25 commercial real estate owners, operators, and third-party property management companies in the United States, we actually work with 22 of them. Even more exciting than our growth has been our ability to retain our customers. We have a 99% customer retention rate, which our clients actually attribute to our stellar 24/7, 365 support team. So moving along, what is it exactly that we do? Our flagship product is our Overtime HVAC automation tool, which essentially allows an authorized tenant to make a request for after-hours air using any web-enabled device. We're connected directly to the building automation system and are able to remotely activate the appropriate points in that system so that the HVAC can be delivered to the tenant suite. Simultaneously, our system will also automatically log that request for billing purposes. From there, we can push the overtime HVAC charges to either your work order system or format a CSV file that can be easily uploaded to your accounting software. So if your current process involves deploying engineers to program HVAC requests and having property teams manage the billing manually, our team can certainly help there. Parallel to our overtime HVAC program, we have an automated submeter reading and billing solution, which supports both manual and network meters. For manual standalone meters, we have an app that helps streamline the read collection process and eliminates the need for an engineer to record those meter readings on a clipboard. For network meters, we're able to connect to your existing meter data recorder. If it's a BMS or any other meter data collection device, our system can remotely pull all that data to our platform so that we can generate monthly tenant invoice statements. One of the biggest labor-saving features to our submeter solution is that all the tenant utility billbacks can be uploaded to your accounting system without the need of any manual data entry. Last but not least, a lot of people may or may not know this, but in December 2019, Genea acquired a fully integrated cloud-based access control system. It's a fully loaded platform that supports all your security management needs, including access control, video management, and touchless visitor access as well. So that's our solution suite. That's a brief summary of our solution suite. We'll move on to introduce our industry experts for today. First up is Brian Haine. Brian has over 35 years of experience in the building industry as an electrician, HVAC controls technician, and project manager. He's a master of metering theory, metering systems, and configuring network infrastructures. He's also our in-house self-proclaimed nerd on all submeters and meter collection systems. Alongside Brian, we have Liz Machkowski. Liz has over 37 years of experience in the commercial real estate industry, and most notably as the Senior Vice President of Operations and Sustainability for SL Green based in New York, where she was overseeing a portfolio of over 47 million square feet. She's also serving currently as a senior advisor for Genea for the past 2 years. And again, my name is Yoni Ron. I oversee sales on the East Coast for Genea and will be moderating today's webinar. Those are our experts. Brian, I'll kick it over to you to get us started.
Hey, thanks for the introduction there, Yoni. And as Yoni said, and as a couple of people have already asked, we're going to be looking primarily at some of the local regulations around California Title 24, New York Law 88 and 32. But there's other people saying, well, how does this affect me? I'm in Louisiana. This is how it affects you. This is the code adoption for ASHRAE 90.1. And as you can see, many of the states have adopted different versions of this ASHRAE set of regulations. So let's go and look at it. On the next slide, let's go and see what these regulations actually mean for you and how they impact you. So ASHRAE 90.1 covers non-residential buildings. And like many of the regulations, it's based on building size, service size, and some other things. And we'll take a look at that in just a second. But the idea of the ASHRAE code is to help buildings and tenants focus on measuring equipment efficiency and energy reduction. And although ASHRAE hasn't specifically called out the aggregation of electrical systems to do metering, it does sort of imply it because it requires you to record different load types. To do that, you're probably going to have to install some multi-circuit meters on panels that do multiple load types. Again, that's a much deeper discussion that we can get into later on. What ASHRAE does ask for is that reporting has become much more granular. Building usage needs to be reported, as does individual tenant usage need to be reported and displayed. Everyone's asking for reading every 15 minutes. So the manual meter reading solution is going to become a little bit more difficult unless you want to employ an engineer to walk around and record meters every 15 minutes. You're going to get some exercise, that's for sure. Anyway, let's take a look on the next slide at some of the similarities between the different rule sets here. So we're looking at obviously ASHRAE, which covers the entire country, and then the Title 24 for California, New York, and the Washington Code, which is often referred to as City of Seattle Code. They're incredibly similar, and they seem to use the same numbering scheme. So I'm pretty sure they're the same code. But as you can see, they're all in place right now. When New York says compliance by January 1st, it means it's in place now and you must be compliant. But as you can see, the different requirements, they're all very, very similar. Everyone wants to know about lighting, HVAC systems, et cetera, et cetera. So what we should probably do is let's dig into some of these a little bit more. And so that you don't have to listen to my voice, let's kick it over to Liz and let Liz take a look at New York.
Thank you, Brian. Local Law 97 of 2019 is the centerpiece of New York City's ambitious Climate Mobilization Act. The purpose behind Local 97 is to mandate that buildings do their part to meet New York City's 80 by 50 greenhouse gas reduction goals. If you're wondering whether Local 97 applies to your building, the answer is probably yes. The bill broadly applies to buildings 25,000 square feet and larger, or to 2 or more buildings on the same tax lot together that exceed 50,000 square feet. The only exclusions from the bill are houses of worship and buildings with more than 35% rent-regulated units. It's very important to keep in mind that everything is not set in stone. While Local Law 97 establishes guidelines for limiting New York City's building emissions, many of the details have not been ironed out. While the bill includes guidelines for greenhouse gas coefficients during the initial compliance period, subsequent standards will be set through rulemaking. In addition, the emissions limits are subject to change and lack guidelines for 2035 onward. Limits are assigned according to building occupancy type, with accommodations made for energy-intensive facilities. The alternative compliance paths are also likely to be modified during the rulemaking process. So far, New York City has accomplished the creation of a new department, the Office of Building Energy and Emissions Performance, and it's charged with implementing and enforcing climate policies. They've also established a 16-member climate advisory board tasked with hammering out detailed recommendations on the bill's effective implementation and enforcement. On the next slide, you can see the New York City timeline they've developed for the implementation phases. Local Law 97 outlines 2 introductory compliance phases with an initial period of 2024 to 2029. This one, the limits are rigid and they're set to target those New York City buildings with the highest emission intensity levels. The limits for the second compliance period of 2030 to 2034 are also in line with the city's interim emission reduction goals of 40% by 2030. The Office of Building Energy and Emissions Performance will have some discretion in determining the compliance path and the carbon calculation process through the rulemaking process, but the 40% reduction is not going to change. That requirement can only be made more stringent in the future. On the next slide, we're going to talk about Local Law 88. This includes submetering and lighting, as Brian had mentioned, and this requires that you submeter all of your tenant spaces and that you issue them monthly statements showing the electric usage. And this is regardless of what your lease language calls for. You can have electric rent inclusion factor and still be required to comply with the submetering and the monthly statements. Failure to meet these deadlines will result in fines, although the fines themselves have not yet been established. The rulemaking process will establish additional guidelines, including how to measure the square footage, what the calculations of fines are, etc. And this will all be done prior to the compliance date of January 1st, 2025. The lighting provision has standard caps limiting the watts per square foot, which can generally be accomplished by swapping out existing light bulbs for LEDs and adding motion-activated light switches. The spaces you should evaluate for compliance are generally those whose lighting has not been upgraded since July of 2010. And although the compliance deadline is almost 4 years away, it's critical to evaluate all of your tenant spaces in your portfolio now and identify where lighting upgrades are required and submeters still need to be installed. This evaluation will allow you to manage and plan your operating and capital budgets, and also determine whether any expenses can be passed on to your tenants. It will also identify when tenants are renewing or new tenants are negotiating leases, whether your existing lease language should be modified in order to recoup some of these expenses. It's also less costly to perform the required upgrades when the spaces are vacant and avoid overtime costs. On the next slide, we'll see Local Law 132, which amended Local Law 88, and this was passed in 2016, and it made the requirements more stringent. This law now impacts 57,000 buildings in New York City, and it reduced the building square footage for compliance from 50,000 down to 25,000. It also reduced the square footage threshold for tenants from 10,000 down to 5,000. And that's regardless of whether the space is on one floor or spread across multiple floors. The 5,000 square footage also applies to entire floors, even if they are leased to multiple tenants. Keep in mind that compliance reports must be certified by a registered design professional or licensed master or special electrician to certify compliance. Brian will now talk about California's Title 24.
Hey, thanks, Liz. And just to address some of the stuff I'm seeing in the chat, yeah, as you guys will know, California and New York tend to come up with these ideas first, and they come across the rest of the country. So even if these don't apply to you right now for these specific states, you need to be aware of it. ASHRAE does apply to you. And there's 9 states that don't follow ASHRAE right now, but that's changing. So yeah, this is very, very relevant for anyone in the real estate business. This is coming, be ready for it. And as Liz says, the New York laws are compliant in 2025, which means we should be working on it now. The other states, we need to work out capital budgets for doing this sort of work and make tenants aware of it so we're not disturbing tenants. But anyway, let me jump back onto Title 24. So Title 24 in California gets updated every 3 years. And the next one will become effective in 2023. So they're already working on that. But if you look at the rules, it pretty much expands the ASHRAE 90.1 idea, and it takes it out to 10 different load types that we have to measure. Under ASHRAE, it was half a dozen or so. If you need to look at those, the best place to go and look is table 130.5b. It tells you exactly what has to be measured and how, etc. The other thing that I can hear going on in people's minds is this is only new buildings. We put here requires devices installed in new buildings. Well, I'm not a legal expert, but the way I read the code is that under section 141, it talks about modifications. So if any of you property managers have had tenants do TIs, and during that TI, the architect asked for controlled outlets, occupancy controlled outlets, that's right in that same section 141. It talks about metering under the same conditions. So again, get used to it. It's coming. This is the next 5 years are going to be meter, 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 meter. So anyway, that's Title 24. Very progressive stuff in California and some good stuff there. The next one I want to just briefly touch on is Washington State. So this sort of started off as Seattle City Code, and you can see they've done some nice stuff in Washington. They've done it a little bit differently in that instead of a bunch of rules, they're more focused on the different load types, but also the requirements for the metering systems. So they specifically call out the metering systems, the data collection systems, the data display and system commissioning systems. So instead of just throwing some meters on the wall and an electrician during a TI says, hey, the light came on and the smoke didn't come out, they're actually requiring certified sign-off in the same way that Liz mentioned for New York. We have to have everything documented. So Washington's doing some really nice stuff, in my opinion. So on the next slide, let's go and look about what the next steps are. So what do we need to do first? The first thing that we need to look at is identify what we need to meter. Depending on what state you're in, look at the relevant codes. Say in California, it's 10 load types. There's a bunch of electrical type loads. So let's go and identify those. Gas consuming loads. If you've got restaurants, you need to know how much gas is consumed. That needs to be reported as part of your energy spend. The same with water. Water is quite a common thing for residential as well. If you've got restaurants in your building, you better be charging them water because they're doing a lot of washing, pre-COVID anyway. Other utilities, particularly in the larger cities. I know in LA, they buy steam in from central plant. It's another utility. Just because we don't understand, we're not used to steam, then we still need to bill for it. And as we've mentioned in many of these rule sets, there's a requirement for tenant spaces as opposed to in-house equipment. So you need to meter and monitor your air handlers on the roof, even if they serve multiple tenants, and you need to monitor the tenant space equipment. And in a lot of cases, you need to report on this tenant has this equipment and this is how much we're billing them for, and this is how much they're using. So big subject there. Identify what to meter and what to collect. The next question is, do you have the hardware in place? And even if you have meters in place, how is that data collected? As Yoni mentioned, we have an app that allows you to do that. We can also do network meters. Well, can your existing hardware be networked? Can the data be collected from that equipment? So first place to start, let's break out some of those drawings. Electrical single line diagrams, the plumbing as-built diagrams, all of that sort of stuff from construction, and any TI documentation you have. Get all of that together and you can identify exactly what needs to be metered. Does that tenant have a supplemental AC unit? Well, guess what? You're going to need to meter not only the electrical, but the chilled or condenser water consumption for that. So a lot of information we need to gather here. Once you have that, well, the next step is probably the easiest step of all. Talk to Genea. At Genea, we can help you out with navigating this, navigating drawings, looking at what needs to be metered, the sort of hardware that you can install, as I mentioned before, multi-circuit meters to capture individual loads on panels. I know a lot of our partners are on this webinar. Thank you, gentlemen, ladies. Yeah, talk to Genea. We will walk you through the minefield of submetering. So that's pretty much all I've got. I don't see any more questions there. So I'm going to hand it back to Yoni.
Thanks, Brian. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Both you and Liz, super informative. For everyone listening in, if you do have any questions, please feel free to kick them over. While that's happening, and in the meantime, we'll change gears a bit and talk a little bit about some of the benefits working with Genea and how we can help get you started with meeting some of these requirements that are coming down the pipe. So one of the first things to think about in the context of these meter mandates is how to get your meter environment pushed to the cloud so you have easy access to visualize and report on your building's energy usage. The good news is that with Genea, our meter data management and tenant billing software can bring both your manual and network meter environments to the cloud and take over the billing for virtually no upfront costs. Our systems are super agnostic, so it doesn't matter what type of utility or meter you're billing back, we can work with any and all of your existing hardware. If you're already set up with the digital infrastructure, we can monitor network meters around the clock. And once we receive the utility bills, our billing engine can automate your monthly invoice statements and import those charges directly into your accounting software. So no one on your team has to enter in data manually. We also provide an audit trail for all the reads and all the invoices. So if your tenants ever do question a bill, we have a backup to all the data to support how we arrived at the charges. So let's jump into migrating manual standalone meters. That seems to be the majority of the market, seems to be focused on how to migrate a manual infrastructure to the cloud. So just so you understand what I'm talking about and to kind of jump into what Brian mentioned on our app, I mentioned earlier that we have an app for collecting and validating meter reads. How we do this is by gathering all your meter information in advance and loading it into our database. We'll ship out asset stickers that have QR codes on them. They're placed on the physical meter, and once the engineer scans the meter using the Genea app, a verification photo is automatically taken and archived into our platform. The engineer then enters in the read displayed on the meter, and one noteworthy point here is that we develop validation logic to assure the read is within the historical trend, so we have confidence the read was entered in correctly. From there, the information automatically uploads to our database so we can prepare our billing engine to create the tenant invoice package on a monthly basis. For digital meters, we have a different type of solution, but we can connect to any network meter environment. Depending on the meter collection system you have in place, that can mean we're communicating over BACnet or any other communication protocol already being used in the building. Our software is set up to be able to read your network meters in intervals of every 15 minutes to give you ongoing data about your energy usage. And even more important is what to do with that data. So once the data is pulled into our platform, we can trend that into any period of information that you need. So looking at, what you want to do with the data and how you want to trend it, we can pull it in PDF or Excel reports and break it down in daily, weekly, or even quarterly reports. And then finally, speaking to our reporting capabilities, you can also create reports based on energy usage and costs, revenue by tenant by month, and a host of other customer reports we can create based on your needs. I realize we covered a lot in a short period of time, but that does bring us to the end of the presentation today. Are there any questions we can help answer at this time?
Hey, Yoni. So I saw a couple of questions that I just want to reinforce to everybody. Yes, this will affect Colorado, ASHRAE 90.1. Yes, Texas, ASHRAE 90.1. This is affecting an awful lot of states. And I keep seeing the same question. Yes, this does affect you.
How about Florida?
Yep, Florida's on the ASHRAE map. The last thing I saw was they're following 90.1 2013, and 2013 did introduce the concept of metering separate loads. So yes, that is in there. But hey, Florida, they're going to be updating it soon. So you may be on 2016 or 2019 soon.
Somebody's asking about Michigan.
Yep. So again, Michigan is covered by ASHRAE 90.1. There are some other rules in Michigan regarding actual billing. That is a totally different subject. This is, you can't bill it until you've got the meter in place. Remember, you can't measure what you can't see. So yes.
Liz, we have a question asking if this includes Westchester County as well.
Local law 97 and 88 are not going to apply to Westchester specifically. They're not required to comply, with those deadlines or specifics. But I think, as Brian's been saying, it doesn't mean that they're not covered by, other laws or reasons that they're going to have to comply. But it's not 88 and 97.
Gotcha. And Brian, North Carolina?
Yep, I was just referring back to the map. Live and die by the map. Yep, North Carolina is 90.1 2010. 2010 does not call out specifics for metering. But guess what? 2010 is 11 years ago. This will be updated. Without getting to politics and all that sort of thing, when we talk about things like the Paris Climate Agreement, New York is insisting on reduction of emissions. California is going to be doing the same. The whole country will be doing the same. So even if you're not covered by these regulations right now, or the regulations that your state is covered by don't specifically call out for it, it makes sense to be prepared. Let's not suddenly find that we need to do this and hey, I've got $150,000 capital expense that we need to shell out to upgrade the building, when you could have been doing it now, not disrupting tenants all at once. And of course, if you're billing back the tenants, you're getting the revenue back. So it does make sense for the building to be thinking about it now.
Brian, another question for California. Can you just touch on who exactly is going to be affected?
So it covers all non-residential buildings. There's another set of regulations about residential buildings, but it covers non-residential buildings. And if you go into Title 24, 130.5, Table A, that tells you the service sizes. So the way California works is anything below a 50 kVA service, you only have to monitor consumption. As the service size goes up, there's a requirement for consumption, demand, et cetera, et cetera. It's all laid out in 130.5, and it's definitely worth a read if that affects you. Or give me a call and we can go through it.
I think
Someone's asked about Alaska.
oh, I might have missed that. Alaska. Ryan, you have any insight on Alaska?
Yeah, so Alaska has no statewide code that I know of right now. And I'll be honest with you, trying to keep up with codes is somewhat of a full-time job. So if anyone knows that there is a code in Alaska that I should be looking again, yeah, Yoni, can you slide back to the map, please? Slide 5 or 6, I think it is. Alaska says that it isn't covered by any statewide code at the moment, but it'll be coming.
We have a question from James Percy. At one time, I was told that electric companies city-owned were preventing building owners from billing tenants for energy used.
So sorry, James. Depends what state you're in and different localities. Everything is regulated by state PUC, Public Utilities Commission, or the equivalent. And yes, there are some places that say, hey, you can't bill tenants for energy used. There's a bunch of ways around that though. So yeah, if you've got a specific state or city that you've run across that problem, let us know and I'll take a look at it. Yeah, Austin, no, I don't believe so. I'd like to take a look at that because we do quite a bit of work in Texas and we do bill different places in Texas. So yeah, let me take a look at that and I'll get back to you.
All right, I think we'll give everyone another minute or so. Seems like there's some last minute questions trickling in, but if not, we'll wrap it for the day. Okay. I think that covers us for this afternoon. Oh, spoke too soon. Thank you all. You're welcome, James, and thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. We appreciate you taking the time to learn a little bit more about the energy codes that are coming down the pipe. We're here, we're available. We will send out the recording for you to have as a reference moving forward, and we hope you have a great rest of the week. Thank you so much. Brian, Liz, thank you again.
No problem.
Thank you. Bye.